Gardening is one of humanity's oldest and most enduring activities. Across cultures and throughout history, people have devoted extraordinary amounts of time, effort and creativity to cultivating pieces of the natural world. At first glance, that might seem like a simple pursuit. We plant seeds, tend plants and create beautiful spaces. But when we look more closely, the question becomes far more interesting. Why do we garden? History can tell us why people gardened, but it doesn't completely explain why so many of us still feel drawn to it today. As I talked with fellow gardeners and asked them a simple question, why do you garden? Their answers varied wildly. Yet beneath those different responses, I kept hearing the same underlying theme. At its heart, gardening is an act of nurturing. Whether we realise it or not, gardeners are people who choose to care for living things. We nurture seedlings barely visible above the soil. We nurture plants that may not reach maturity for years. We nurture landscapes that demand patience in a world increasingly built around instant gratification. And perhaps that instinct begins much earlier than we think. And to better understand where that instinct comes from, I sat down recently with my wife Connie to talk about her lifelong relationship with gardening.
I've gardened all my life, and the reason I've done it, I think a lifelong reason, is for the joy of it. Because I've always lived in the Midwest, and so when everything blooms in the spring, the anticipation of having that happen, it's just given me so much joy when I actually see it. I anticipate something growing in the spring, and I just can't wait for it.
I love that phrase, the anticipation. Gardeners spend a lot of time anticipating. We anticipate spring during the coldest days of winter. We anticipate seeds germinating. We anticipate buds opening. We anticipate next year's garden while we're still standing in this year's. And that anticipation is really a form of hope. Every gardener is constantly looking forward to a future that doesn't yet exist. But for Connie, that relationship with growing things goes back even further.
My garden story is, as a very young child, I always wanted to be outside. My parents and my grandmother, who raised me and lived with me, when we were on the weekends, they didn't want to go outside. They were in the house, and I wanted to be outside. And so I could sit outside and just look for a 4-leaf clover. I could do that for hours, sit in the shade and do that. I remember, though, that my dad, when he was outside doing anything, he did plant things. He planted pansies, and I remember loving the little faces on the pansies. And I just loved being outside with him. If he was cutting the grass, that's where I wanted to be. I'm the oldest of 5, and I'm the only one who would chase down garter snakes in the garden because I could scare my brother with them. I have so many memories of that, not necessarily planting anything, although I did plant corn. I planted corn, and I loved my corn stalks, and when they came up, I was so happy.
Think about how deeply a child invests emotionally in a tiny seedling. A few corn stalks become something precious, a pansy becomes a friend, a patch of soil becomes a world of possibilities. When we're young, gardens often feel magical. Connie told me about visiting her grandmother in southern Illinois during the heat of August. Her grandmother would scatter wildflower seeds throughout a fenced yard beneath an old apple tree, and by late summer the flowers towered over her, creating what felt like a vast forest of colour. I suspect many gardeners have similar memories. A grandparent's vegetable patch, a parent's rose garden, the first sunflower that seemed impossibly tall, the first tomato plant that actually produced fruit, the first flower we grew ourselves. Long before we understand horticulture, we understand the joy of helping something to grow. And perhaps that's where the need to nurture first reveals itself. As children, we discover that our actions matter. Watering matters, caring matters, paying attention matters. The living world responds to us. But what happens to that childhood wonder as we grow older? For many gardeners, the relationship changes. The playground becomes a sanctuary. The excitement of growing things remains, but it takes on a deeper meaning.
Gardening is just the most joyful experience, but it can also be very meditative, because in my younger days, when I was able to get on the ground and weeding is very meditative. It's something that gives you a focus, and there's nothing else in your mind except getting that job done. And it doesn't feel like work. It feels like meditation.
I think many gardeners will recognise exactly what Connie is describing. Gardening has a way of slowing us down. When you're pulling weeds, dividing perennials, planting bulbs, or pruning shrubs, your attention naturally narrows to the task at hand. The endless distractions of modern life begin to fade into the background. The emails can wait, the news can wait, the endless stream of notifications can wait. For a little while, there is only the garden. The author Mary Sarton captured this beautifully when she wrote, "Everything that slows us down and forces patience, everything that sets us back into the slow circles of nature is a help. Gardening is an instrument of grace." I think she understood something that gardeners experience intuitively. Gardening reconnects us with a rhythm much older than ourselves. A peony blooms when it's ready, a tree grows at its own pace, a newly planted bed may take years to reach its full potential. Nature refuses to be rushed, and perhaps that's one reason so many people find gardening restorative. A fellow member of our garden club, Beth, described that feeling perfectly.
I love actually getting my hands dirty. So first time in the spring, you know how you get kind of the winter doldrums, especially as gardeners. You know this too, man. By the end of winter, you just want to see some green. And I think there's something about sticking my hands in the dirt in the spring and getting them really dirty, dirt under my nails. So the first couple times I work in the garden, it revitalizes me. I find gardening to be a meditation. If I'm feeling like overwhelmed by, like if I've been really busy and stuff, I go out in the garden. Sometimes I work in the garden. Sometimes I just walk around and look at things. And it's just, by the time I'm done, I'm just, it's lovely.
I think Beth captures something many of us feel but rarely put into words. After a long winter, getting our hands back in the soil feels like waking up. The garden isn't simply a place we visit, it's a place that restores us. And that restoration may be connected to something even deeper. Human beings seem to have a natural desire to care for something beyond themselves. We care for children, we care for pets, we care for our homes, we care for aging parents, we volunteer in our communities, we help our neighbours. Gardening gives us another way to express that same instinct. The garden needs us. And perhaps in some ways we need the garden too. Gertrude Jekyll once wrote, "A garden is a grand teacher. It teaches patience and careful watchfulness. It teaches industry and thrift. Above all, it teaches us entire trust." And trust is such an interesting word, because so much of gardening depends on faith in things we cannot yet see. We plant a seed and trust it will germinate. We plant a tree and trust it will establish itself. We divide a perennial and trust it will recover. We invest time, effort, and energy with no guarantee of success. Audrey Hepburn expressed a similar idea when she famously said, "To plant a garden is to believe in tomorrow." Every garden is an act of optimism. Every garden is a declaration that the future matters. But nurturing doesn't stop with plants. Something fascinating happens when people begin caring deeply for a garden. The desire to nurture naturally expands. Beth told me she doesn't consider herself a traditional artist. Yet she finds tremendous satisfaction and creativity in designing landscapes and placing stones throughout her garden. And I think that's important. A garden isn't something we consume, it's something we create. Every path, every border, every planting combination reflects decisions we've made. Gardens become expressions of who we are. The writer Sydney Eddison once observed, "Gardens are a form of autobiography." And the more I garden, the more true that statement seems. When I look around our own gardens, I don't simply see plants, I see memories. I see projects completed over 25 years. I see successes and failures. I see gifts from friends. I see ideas inspired by gardens we've visited. And most importantly, I see years of work shared between Connie and me. Our garden tells our story. And perhaps every garden tells the story of its gardener. But the story doesn't end there, because gardeners rarely keep their passion to themselves. The urge to nurture eventually reaches beyond the garden gate. 20 years ago, Beth joined our local garden club after encouragement from a friend. She told me it was one of the best decisions she's ever made because of the people she met. Listen to how she describes the club's annual plant sale.
The plant sale is tomorrow, and it's from 8 until noon. But we recommend people get here early because the plants are fantastic. They're dug from local gardens, and so they are not like they're not going to suffer from culture shock. And this year has been a wonderful year for digging plants.
Think about the cycle Beth is describing. Plants are dug from local gardens and shared with neighbours. Knowledge is shared, stories are shared, friendships are shared. Even old garden ornaments find new homes and new life. Gardeners are constantly giving things away: plants, seeds, cuttings, advice, encouragement and time. The need to nurture doesn't stop with flowers and vegetables. It extends into community. Connie once made an observation that has stayed with me. She said that a garden ultimately interacts with everything: the birds, the bees, butterflies, the rabbits, the neighbours who walk by, the friends who visit, the people who receive divisions from your favourite plants. The garden pulls us outward. We begin by nurturing a seed, but often we end up nurturing relationships. And maybe that's the deeper answer to our question: why do we garden? I think we garden because nurturing something gives meaning to our lives. We garden because caring for living things satisfies a deeply human instinct. We garden because it teaches us patience, humility, trust, and optimism. We garden because it reconnects us with nature and with ourselves. And perhaps most importantly, we garden because the act of nurturing rarely stays confined to the garden. It spreads from plants to people, from flowers to friendships, from soil to community. The flowers are wonderful, the trees are beautiful, the birds, butterflies and bees are wonderful. But what keeps many of us gardening year after year may be something even deeper. It may simply be that human beings were made to nurture. And in the garden, we often find one of the most beautiful ways to do exactly that. I'd love to hear your answer. Why do you garden? And what's your garden story? Leave a comment below and let us know. Until next time, happy gardening.